So my apologies, when I built the syllabus for the class, I did not take into account that Wednesday is Juneteenth. I'm working that day. I don't know how many of the rest of you are working that day, but the school is officially off. So we will postpone class on Wednesday. The readings that were due for Wednesday, you can push them out till next Monday, and then we'll make the paper due on Sunday. All right. And then I will just work very hard to turn those around to have them back to you by Wednesday of that week. So that because your full paper is due when you come back from the break, and I want to make sure I give you all my comments and plenty of time in that regard. But we will not meet this Wednesday. Just make sure. Yep. Okay. Then feedback on your papers. Everybody did very well. Obviously, the nature of this assignment is one that it would be difficult not to do well. So everyone received a perfect score. Do not grow accustomed to such generosity on my part. If you talk to previous cohorts, I am not a difficult grader, but I do tend to make a lot of comments. Just a couple of things that I noticed across multiple papers. One of these, really neither of these are necessarily going to lose you points, but you should know what your professor likes. You should know how your supervisor likes things. Numbers 0 through 12 spell out. Anything 13 and above, you can use the numbers themselves, but 0 through 12, please do spell out. I will notice a split infinitive every single time. Like I said, you're not losing points for that, but you should know that that's like unpleasant to me. So where I saw it in your papers, I commented. I would, if you see like a looping line in your paper, it almost will always indicate a split infinitive where you've put a modifier in between the to and the verbal form there. Again, I realize this is personal proclivity. It represents my own mental instability, but I will see it every single time. So you should just know that I'm gonna see that. Otherwise, no, the papers were very good. I believe that your expectations for the class and what you're looking for will be very much in line with what I hope we're able to accomplish. So we should be good in that regard. You all write very well, and so that pleases me. I love the English language, love to see it rendered well on paper, and so you've all done very well with that. So just any questions about the papers one way or the other? Any of my notations? An orphan, in some of your papers I'll circle. If you have just one word at the end of a paragraph that's on a line by itself, that's considered an orphan. That's another thing that just I can't help but see. So just modify your paragraph, either edit it so that it slides up a line or become more verbose, add a couple of words and push something else onto the same line there. Again, though, those kinds of things won't take away points. I'll just be judging you in my heart. So you should know that. Okay, so we have a couple of articles, couple of things that we've read for this evening. The first focuses on various kinds of funding that entrepreneurs can seek for their endeavors. What were some of your initial reactions to the article? Obviously, it's laid out from smaller to larger. But any initial reactions to that first to the first article on the different kinds of funding a person or an organization might seek? I'll have my questions that we can discuss from the article, but always like to give folks an opportunity. If there was something that stood out to you, something in particular that, you wanted to comment on, you'd be welcome to do so.
It's not surprising that there's not a number of big banks that are going to invest in small companies.
Yes.
They typically go after friends and family, and I thought that was interesting.
Yep.
There's not a whole lot more ventures that are going on.
Yes. Yep. The the analogy when it comes to seeking the traditional business loan from a bank, the analogy that is almost universally given is they want you to prove that you don't need the umbrella, and they're going to take it back as soon as it starts to rain. Now, throughout economic history, that traditional business loan for a lot of people was the only avenue. I mean, outside of friends and family, or an angel perhaps that you might find. But even, I mean, we mentioned in class, we've mentioned SRC. I don't know how many of you are familiar with their story, but they had to go to, I want to say it was 49 banks before they finally got a bank that would loan them their money. And the story that is told, and I think it's true, is that the officer that gave them that loan was fired the next day because the loan was so outrageous. Now they paid that mortgage every single month, but the traditional business bank loan, for a lot, at least of American economic history, was the main avenue for funding. This article represents a lot of newer avenues that have opened up for folks. So, but yeah, the traditional business loan is becoming less and less common. Still probably one of the major ways that funding is sought, but it is losing its share in that regard. So one of the things right off the bat that the article said was that 35% of the world's new unicorns are in developing countries. So a unicorn, in the notes, what is a unicorn?
Startup company.
Yes, yeah, a startup that has a valuation, and I promise, I will put all the slides on Canvas. I will turn them into PDFs and put them on Canvas. My last couple of weekends have been very busy, but I will, since we now have Wednesday night available to us, by Wednesday, I should have all the PowerPoints up through tonight on Canvas as a PDF. But yes, a startup that has a valuation of $1 billion. That's crazy. That's crazy to think about. That's even a thing. but 35% of them are in developing countries. Why would these sorts of countries be producing so many unicorns? What are the factors in a developing country that will allow for this particular statistic? What would you think? I don't think the article says. I was just wondering it for myself. I had some ideas.
The different circumstances might force entrepreneurs to think outside the box, which would be different from
Yes. Developing countries represent, I mean, the term that comes to my mind, they're a little bit like the wild, wild west. They're not as regulated as countries that are already developed. And because they are developing, the economies are, it's as if they are on the cusp of taking off. I mean, it's China from 15 years ago. If you could have traveled to China even 20 years ago to what it is now, it's revolutionary. Now, China has certain qualities to it that allow it to have done some of these things. My youngest son visited China for almost a month last summer. And what they have done in China is they have built these, what they call like a town neighborhood, where it's basically, I don't know how much space it would be, way smaller land area than Springfield, into which they would put millions of people. Would be a geographical square that they lined out with apartments, apartment buildings. Very few people have houses in China. I spoke earlier about my friends that lived in San Diego. They've basically taken this model of a self-inclusive neighborhood, and it has everything in it that you would need. There are parks, there are grocery stores, everything that is needed has been built into this town square. What allowed China to be able to do that? Nobody owns land. What was there before, they just wiped it out and built these new things. China has that capability. Not
to minimize like the transportation issues that they have.
There are a lot of reasons why China has moved to this model of communal living. One is because of the transportation. China is one of the largest producers of smog, one of the, if not the largest. Them and India are probably duking it out for that particular title. But there were traffic jams in China that lasted for a week. You could be on the road to Beijing, you could be on the road to Shanghai, and you'd be stuck in traffic, and it wouldn't move for a week. When we lived in Taiwan, there was one legal parking spot for every 10 cars in Taiwan. One legal parking spot for every 10 cars. So what do you have? You have double parking at, it creates chaos. In China, part of what they've done in terms of building these inclusive communities is to try and cut down the need for transportation. That is true. During COVID, and I mean, they can enact this at any time that they wish. You wouldn't be allowed outside of your community. China regulates its people very, very stridently at various times. There are a lot of reasons that they have moved to that particular model. And like I said, they had the authority to do so, not making an ethical or moral statement about what they've done. But the economy, once China really opened up, their economy, and we'll read more about this later in the summer when we get to the segment on Asia. It was, like I said, it was just revolutionary. If you could have gone back 20 years ago and then fast forwarded to today, it would be very difficult to imagine how much they have done in such a short period of time. But developing countries, and even stepping outside of China that has a very dominating form of government, a lot of developing countries don't have the regulations that already developed countries have. And they have populations of people that are starving. They are eager to enter the 21st century and to have goods and services available to them. It's very difficult in an established economy. I mean, obviously in America, we have plenty of these kinds of entities, these kinds of unicorns, but developing countries offer the population of people that are eager to participate in these things, and there aren't the regulations. So that's a big, to me, that's a big part of the reason why these developing countries are going to be producing these kinds of entities. So they have 4 stages of the launching of an organization. There's the exploration, there's the development, there is revenue generation, and then there's eventually profit. The article talks about how at the different stages, you need different kinds of funding and probably even different levels of funding. Why does an organization need funding at the latter 2 stages? Once it's generating revenue, once it's generating profit, why are organizations like that still looking for funding?
Scale up.
Yes, you might want to scale up. You might want to offer new products so that the research, and really, just because you're generating revenue, that doesn't mean you're breaking even. So generating revenue, good. All right, that's a good thing. But the goal, of course, is getting to a point where you are self-sustaining and generating profit. But even for companies that eventually become profitable, they will often still be looking for funding, even at those stages. So with the 4 stages, kind of turning toward the different types of funding that the article talks about, what are some of the types of funding more likely to attach to each stage? What forms did they talk about being attached more to exploration and development, and which are more attached to revenue and profit?
I think for friends and family, it talked about specifically like the first few months of getting through. So that'd be more towards, exploration.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that's true. I mean, that's true here in America, and to a certain extent, that is true in around the world. One of the organizations that's not going to be able to be with us this summer, that has been with us the past few summers, it's based here in Springfield. It's called the Rainbow Network. They do holistic nonprofit service in Nicaragua. Nicaragua is the second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. First poorest is Haiti. But they offer 5 different kinds of services. Education, they pay for students to go to school. They offer medical services. They offer nutrition. They offer housing, and they offer economic development. For many years, they made available what they called micro loans. Loans to us that here in America wouldn't even pay wages for 2 months. A $5,000 loan. A $5,000 loan in Nicaragua was more than enough for many individuals to launch businesses that took them from exploration to profit. I got to see myself when I visited there, people that had taken their $5,000 and had built like a brick oven and turned that into a bakery business. There was one whole village that we visited where they had received multiple microloans, and the whole village was employed in making hammocks. They were eventually able to phase out that economic micro loan because all people grew beyond the need for it. But in a country that poor, like I said, $5,000 in America, that's not gonna get you anywhere. But in certain places, it can make a whole life's worth of difference.
So what's your feeling, or what are your thoughts on the difference between, which is preferable, between offering a micro and offering, like, providing a sheep or a goat or a well? I mean, I guess I'm just wondering.
Yes.
Which
Yeah.
plays out better?
You talk about a well now, the organization that does this work in Nicaragua, they also actually, I left out the fact that they also dig wells for villages. That's almost a basic life need. I mean, that's something you need before you can almost even get to the starting line for business. But this particular organization that I worked for 18 months, and the lady who is now the executive director, the only reason she can't be here this summer is she's in Nicaragua all summer long. And their philosophy, their approach to this is to give, I mean, it's cliche, but to give a hand up, not a hand out. Now, there may have been individuals that would apply for the microloan and use that to buy goats, or use that to, other livestock or animals, or something of that sort. But they this particular organization in its philosophy, really in nothing that they do, there's always a responsibility on the part of the people, whether it's even housing or education or nutrition. They only work with villages where the leaders of the whole village come together and sign an agreement that they're going to be the ones to volunteer in the nutrition program, that they're going to support the education and make sure the kids go to school. This particular organization's philosophy built accountability into the whole model. The difficulty, the difficulty with any of those kinds of smaller things is, one major event can throw everything off. Nicaragua's had some governmental instability, as has much of Central America. It is prone to earthquakes and monsoons, hurricanes, things of that sort. So it's fragile. The economy there is always somewhat fragile. But I don't, personally, I myself, I wouldn't have deep convictions one way or the other. I really do like their model, but I would support anyone doing anything good to help people grow their own ability to sustain their lives. So, does that answer your
I
question?
guess I was just wondering if they steward the microloans as well. I mean,
Oh,
in terms, like, as opposed to just being provided something that they can then use to generate revenue for their team, like a vote or something.
yeah, the paying off of those microloans is a huge village celebration. When they're working with when they were working with a particular village, and they would give, let's say they would give 5 microloans to 5 different individuals in that particular village. They were all on the same plan in terms of timeline. And so a year from then, or whatever the timeline was, it was a big thing in that village for all of those individuals to pay those loans off. And so they did, I mean, like I said, they built in accountability, and I don't think that there were very many instances at all of people that weren't able to pay off those loans. Just some, one of the things they talked about was crowdfunding. Before I get to that page, so this article written in 2020, they had talked about how crowdfunding was growing at a great clip. So we're 4 years down the road from this. Do you think crowdfunding has continued to bloom? Did it reach a plateau? Has it fallen off a little bit? What would be your guesses as to how crowdfunding is used as a funding source 4 years after this article? Yes, it has continued to grow. So I came across, as I was reading stuff and preparing for tonight, that was the question I asked myself. Has this continued to grow? And the answer is yes. So the article talked about how in 2020 there was 20 billion, that was throughout the world. So last year there was more than 17 billion just in North America. From 22 to 23, it had grown 33%. And I think they said from 19 to 20, it had grown 17%. Is that right? Something like that. So it is continuing to grow. There were 6.5 million crowdfunding campaigns last year. That's kind of crazy. A successful campaign, one that made what it was seeking, averaged 28,000. But the average amount raised by all crowdfunding campaigns was $824. So not very many. There are a lot of very small crowdfunding things. So only 22% of crowdfunding campaigns are successful. They average 47 backers. A fully funded one averages 300. The average pledge for a fully funded was 96. Interestingly enough, the average pledge for all projects was only 88. It's expected worldwide to grow to 300 billion by the end of this decade. So it is projected to continue. So if it was at 6.5 million last year, they anticipate having, and I don't know how they came up with 12,063,870 campaigns by 2023, but that's, hey, it was on the internet. So, you know, has to be true. If you have, so here's just some thoughts. Here's some tips for you when it comes to if you ever consider doing a crowdfunding campaign. Having a video, those campaigns earned 105% more than campaigns without a video. Updating your followers regularly, 126% more raised. You need to raise at least 30% of your goal in the first week. So if you share it on crowdfunding websites, 53%. If you send it out by email to actual people, converts to donations, 12% on Facebook, 3% on Twitter. And then all or nothing model campaigns funded fully at twice the rate of keep it all campaigns. You do know the difference. So an all or nothing means, let's say the goal is $20,000. And I send a crowdfunding request to all of you, tell you that, you know, I want to go to Europe and follow Lenny Kravitz around on tour. And it's going to cost me $20,000. All right. All or nothing, if you contribute to my campaign, all or nothing means I have to get to the 20,000. If I don't get to the 20,000, you get your money back. The keep it all campaigns means as soon as you donate it, basically it's gone no matter whether it gets to the goal or not. Personal information gets you 80% more backers. 42% of funds are raised in the first and the last the first 3 days and the last 3 days of a crowdfunding campaign. And then it just has some other things here. And like I said, I will make this available. Individuals aged 24 to 35, much more likely to participate. Those over 45, significantly less likely to participate. Usually takes 11 days to prepare a successful crowdfunding campaign. The average campaign lasts 9 weeks. You have to post at least 4 times throughout the campaign to share updates and keep it before people. Then they have, yeah, okay. So then Kickstarter has had the most completed projects. Fundraiser has the best chance of success of any platform, and Indiegogo raise the most money, the highest average money of any of the platforms. So just some things to consider if you ever find yourself in a position where you want to do a crowdfunding type of thing. Obviously, check the current statistics at the time. But this was kind of fascinating to me. On page 4, it talks about incubators and accelerators, and it includes the website for a comprehensive list of incubators. So right now, you're preparing your second paper. You're choosing your market. I would encourage you, whatever your market is, I would check out that website to see if there is an incubator in that country. The past years when I taught this class, you may not know this, but there is an incubator right here in Springfield. It's housed at the E-Factory. And I plan this year again to have kind of the leader of that incubator come in and talk about the work that they do in Southwest Missouri to incubate small businesses. But in your full paper that you'll turn in when you come back from break, you have to include how you're going to fund it. I just thought I would point out there's a website that would tell you if there's an incubator in your particular country. So it talks about venture capital in Africa, and what was the number that they gave in terms of how much has been invested in Africa? Trying to remember what they had said. Should have marked it in the notes there. In Africa in 2019, there was a total of $2 billion invested via venture capital firms, which was at the time that was more than 7 times the amount from just 4 years earlier. 3 years later in the intervening, so if there was $2 billion in 2019, in 2020, 21, or 21, 22, 23, there's been 13.6 billion. So it continues to grow. Again, in many of these developing countries, a lot of investors are turning in those directions because they represent the highest opportunity for growth. So what are the differences between venture capital, venture debt, and private equity? These are words we hear often. I mean, venture capital, private equity, venture debt may have been something that was new to you, but what are the distinctions? What are the distinctions between these three? Just between the first two, venture capital and venture debt. The difference between those two, with venture capital, oftentimes they are investing in organizations that already have equipment, they may not have everything they need, but usually venture capital is used to help, as you mentioned, even, scale up projects. Venture capital often is coming a little bit later in the process. Venture debt, is where you genuinely have an organization that is very much still in the exploration stage of things. They're coming to you to help buy the things they need. When it comes to what you have to pay back, there isn't that much difference. But in reading the article here, that seemed to me to be one of the larger differences between venture capital and venture debt. If someone is going to grant, what then is equity?
Private equity is normally buyout companies that are more established in their industry and want their track record, that way they know they're investing in something that will have the returns for them.
Yes. And oftentimes with equity, they're looking for an ownership stake in the organization as well. With venture capital, venture debt, they're looking to get their money back with interest, with dividends attached to it. Equity, oftentimes, what they're trading their investments in you for is partial ownership of the company. So those are just some of the differences there. Like I said, these are words we hear. Just want to make sure everyone is kind of aware of that. So as you read through the article, what are some of the specific challenges that foreign countries face in terms of raising funding? This is a class ostensibly about international business. How does international business in this realm differ from similar enterprises and endeavors in America?
It talked about how the information might not be relayed or even taken as seriously in different countries, either because lack of knowledge,
Yep.
they don't know how to do it, or
Right.
it's just not as important to them.
Yes. And so there can be some cultural and language barriers that lead to misunderstandings and when you have those kinds of misunderstandings, people can become then very tight-fisted, much less likely to invest because you just don't share that experience or background. What else?
Some countries have limited protection offered by law.
Yes,
For
absolutely. I mean, the stability, you can invest in a particular country, and this can be true on multiple continents. I mean, we've seen it in Europe, Asia, Africa, and Latin America, where you invest in a particular country and overnight the government can change. And a government that was very pro-capitalism can overnight turn into something where the country simply claims this now belongs to us. That happened as recently as Russia and Ukraine. When Russia invaded Ukraine, hard to believe that it was just 2 years ago. I mean, it was like February, March, April, 22, that they invaded Ukraine. And so a lot of companies, cut off what they were doing in Russia. And what did Russia do? They said, your company now belongs to us. And, so, I mean, there are higher rewards, come with oftentimes higher risks. So, a lack of stability, can be a barrier as well. I mean, with some of these, it talks about, like angel, investors. America, Europe is gonna, and, then the Middle East is gonna have a much higher percentage of billionaires and multimillionaires. A lot of countries have far fewer individuals that can serve in those kinds of roles. I mean, there's just much more, the resources are more limited in that way. As I mentioned earlier, your first paper, that's now due Sunday, focuses on product and service, product and or service and your market. But for the full paper, you want to be thinking and planning now for how you are going to fund your endeavor, because that is a part of the business plan. And that obviously is the business pitch, which reminds me, part of the assignment for the next paper, was to give the elevator pitch. We'll plan to do that next Monday. We'll plan to do that next Monday. So then we have the article on how venture capitalists make decisions. So the first article focused on, every kind of funding that's out there, starting with friends and family and, putting a second mortgage on your own home, all the way up to, equity and venture capital and things of that sort. The second article focuses just on that last grouping, the folks who are making multi-million-dollar decisions, the venture capitalists. So the article states that venture capitalists typically review 100 proposals for every one they choose to support. So what would you think separates out the one from the 99? Based on what you've read, based on your own thought, what will they be looking for?
The reading talked about that a lot of them come from either referrals or networking or who they know.
Yes.
It was pretty interesting, how much of that comes from that.
Interesting and demoralizing. I mean, the oldest cliches are often the truest. It's not what you know. I mean, it's such a, and that's what makes making your dream come true so difficult. If you don't have those built-in relationships. I have that on the next slide. 30% come from referrals, and so I mean, either referrals from other venture capitalists or just people that you know. So I mean, a third of them just come from who you know, not what you know or how well you did one thing or the other. Only 10% came from cold calls. Interestingly, 30% of them came from the venture capitalists initiating contact themselves. They're not waiting for you to come to them. They are keeping an eye on various developments, the news that is out there, and they're all trying to identify someone that they can reach out to. When I read those particular statistics, it was just, I don't know anybody wealthy. How does this help me? This isn't going to help. 2024, and this is where we're still at. So 100 proposals come in. Only 30 of them even lead to meetings with management. 10 make it to a meeting with the partners. Only 5 have actual due diligence attached to them. So what is due diligence? When the article talked about due diligence, what did that refer? Or what would you think due diligence would include? Due diligence would be the actual research that the organization takes on to make sure that your idea and your leadership actually is and are who they say they are, and that everything you say that you can do actually can be done. And a part of that was calling references on the leaders. How many references did they call for due diligence? 10. I mean, I'm in HR. I'll call 2 and maybe 3 referrals on somebody that we're going to hire for a pretty high up, and that's for pretty high up positions. For most of our entry level positions, we check to see if they have a pulse and say, okay, come work for us. When a venture capital company does due diligence, they are up in your business. If you say that your engineers went to MIT, they're going to be checking those transcripts. They're going to be making sure that they actually have the bona fides that you say that they have. So due diligence from a venture capital company is very, very in-depth. And if you say you can do something, if you present yourself in a particular light, you better have that squared away. You better be everything that you say that you are. You better be able to do everything you promise you can do, or you'll be the 4 and not the 1 that gets funded. Any reactions to this model? Any reactions to this business practice? What are just your initial reactions to it?
I thought when it talks, because it talked about it takes like about 80 days to close a deal, I was like, wow, that is a lot of time.
Yep.
To do that. And then it also talked about due diligence was like 120 hours.
Yes.
due diligence.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
a lot of time.
That is,
Vote,
yes.
no wonder it takes
yes,
8 days. to
Right.
vote.
And you've got to build that into your business plan. If you can't feed yourself for 3 months before somebody gets in bed with you, this may not be the avenue you want to go down. I mean, really venture capitalists aren't looking at crazy, wild harebrained schemes. They really are only looking at the most serious kinds of possibilities. When it comes to funding, how did the authors distinguish between the jockey and the horse? So they talk about some venture capitalists focus on the jockey and some focus on the horse. What do they mean by that? It's at the top, page 6 in this particular article.
Entrepreneurial team is the jockey and the startup strategy and business model.
Yes, yep. And the article then goes on to say that usually, I mean, some go with jockey, some go with horse, but the predominance, the majority focus on the jockey, which why would they emphasize the leadership team over the actual product or, business model that you have? Why would that be the case? Yep.
Person, a leadership abilities of the person taking that.
A good leader knows when to change the model. A model is blind. So you have to be, you have to be as confident in the leadership team of this proposal as you can possibly be. Obviously, nothing is foolproof. No leadership team is failure proof, which there are lots of examples and illustrations of leadership teams that should have been able to figure it out, but didn't, couldn't, whatever the case may be. But in general, it was interesting to me that the predominance focuses on the jockey instead of the horse. One of the things this article said was that venture capitalists want to be embedded with the companies they support. Let's see, where was that particular information? That's on page 8. They interact substantially with 60% of their portfolio companies at least once a week. 28% are with them multiple times a week. They offer strategic guidance. They help connect them to other investors, connect them to customers. They offer operational guidance, help with hiring board members, and help with hiring employees. It seemed like there was one other thing that was mentioned, but they aren't just going to give you money and say, okay, now go make me more money. They want to be very involved. What are the benefits and what are the detriments of that kind of practice?
if the entrepreneurial team has differing opinions or views on how they should handle a situation, whether it's hiring or even capital resources, anything like that, it's kind of a gray line on what happens.
Yeah, it is very, yes, a lot of push coming to shove in those kinds of conversations. There is, like you say, there's a very gray line between guidance and actual decision making. It is very difficult to tell the people who are funding your project that you disagree with their direction. It is very difficult to do that. Hopefully the benefits include that these are people coming with experience. And usually venture capitalists will have a niche. They'll only work with technological companies, or they'll only work with pharmaceutical companies, or they'll only work with certain slices of industry because they come to know that particular industry very well. They have that requisite experience that has led to them making millions and millions of dollars. And so you can benefit from that guidance, but you can also be constrained by that guidance. And history is also littered with illustrations of people fighting for a particular dream and having to cave to the people who are funding. That is pretty common experience. I would encourage you to know the terms in the glossary there on page 9. Should you ever be in an organization, a company that's pursuing venture capital, you don't want to be in a meeting where they talk about anti-dilution rights and you glaze over. Like I said, when do we learn things? When we have to learn things. You don't need to know anti-dilution rights right now. You might in the future. Just trying to build yourself a toolbox. Create a document into which you put these things so that in the future, something comes up at work and you're like, I know I've heard something about it, but I don't remember it at this moment. And you've got a document that you can search. That's what I recommend that you do with the various toolboxes that I'll mention as we go through the class. So on page 10, at the top of the second to last paragraph on the left-hand column, it says, it is incumbent upon educators, venture capitalists, and society at large to work to mitigate systemic financial discrimination and ensure that a broader pool of entrepreneurs receives funding and support. The article is trying to talk out of both sides of its mouth here. It's telling us on the one hand that a lot of times your proposal is just going to boil down to who you know. But they're making the argument that it ought not be that way. That we have a responsibility to try and broaden that pool of entrepreneurs who receive funding and support. How could that be done? I mean, it's interesting to me that he lists educators first. I'm not for sure exactly what he expects me to do about this problem, other than to point it out and say, boy, it'd be nice if this weren't the case. And may you all become heads of venture capital companies and say to yourself, I'm gonna do better. That would be wonderful. But what can be done? What are illustrations or examples that you can think of that would even be similar to this? You know, there are a variety that I could point to. I just wonder if any of you are familiar with such protocols, policies, practices. How many of you are familiar with the Rooney Rule in the NFL? You know what the Rooney Rule is in the NFL? In the NFL, if you are hiring a head coach, at the very least, I don't know if it applies, I don't think it applies to all coaching positions. But if you're hiring a head coach, you have to interview a minority candidate. You have to interview the NFL has identified that they have a problem. They are not making enough hires that represent their initiatives and goals in the realm of DEI. And so I think for at least, I bet the Rooney Rule has been in place for at least 25 to 30 years. Someone should Google that. When did the Rooney Rule? 2003. So 21 years, 21 years. Boy, I would have thought maybe it was longer than that. The most famous example of this is the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He would have been one of the very first. I mean, it is doubtful that Pittsburgh would have interviewed him without the rule. Interestingly enough, who is Rooney? Rooney's the previous owner of the Steelers. He's the one who initiated the rule. The Steelers and the Giants both have ties to the Rooney family. So that is an example of something that organizations can do. There were other examples that came to my mind in terms of just like a lot of governmental entities. And even nonprofits that have to conform to certain governmental standards when they bid out a job. You have to give certain numbers of points simply if the bidding company is minority owned or female owned companies. And I mean, so there are, I know the city of Springfield has that written into their bidding process. That there are certain points for bids to contract with the city that can only be gained by minority-owned companies or female-owned companies. Now, what has that led to? That's led to a lot of companies owned by men who make their wife the owner of the company in name. The organization I previously worked for, we ran into a particular instance where that had taken place. But I believe that there are things that can be done to help broaden the pool. The difficulty, like what we said about venture capitalism, when they're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, they don't see the color of your skin. They only see one color. and that color is green. You know, I'm pretty sure I shared this quote at a previous class. The answer to all your questions is money. But I am at heart an idealist and would want all of you to go out into this world as idealists as well. Let us build a better future. Any final comments or thoughts on either of the articles for this evening? All right, reminder, no class Wednesday. We'll push the articles from Wednesday to Monday. Then starting next week, we'll have guests here pretty much every single night. So you won't just have to listen to me prattle on in class. And so be prepared to ask questions as we move forward. Trying to think who is going to be here Monday night. Oh, next Monday, we will have an international finance person here who works for one of the top 5 finance companies in the world. So we'll start off with a bang next week. So just have that in your pipe and smoke on it until we get back next Monday, and come with questions that you might have for them. All right. Anything else this evening? I will look forward to receiving your papers. Again, if you have any issues with Canvas, just send me an email with your paper. Don't don't panic and don't not turn it in. If you have a problem with Canvas, send it to me via email. No harm, no foul. All right. Have a wonderful evening.
Yeah. So are the minutes for Monday gonna show?
No, we'll keep the Monday readings for Monday as well. All right. So I'll trust that you will use Wednesday night to great benefit for this class, just as I will.